Hi, my name is Nadia Nagamootoo, business psychologist, coach, speaker and founder of Avenir Consulting, which creates organisational growth and success via inclusion and diversity. We've been discussing the benefits that diversity brings to companies' bottom line performance for decades with more and more evidence. But there are so many questions organisations still have about how to achieve it. How do you create a culture where people feel valued for their uniqueness and the qualities they bring? I believe it's crucial to the future success and sustainability of every organisation that they find the answer to this question, to make sure that each employee is not only supported but also appreciated. With this podcast, I aim to get some of the key challenges to creating inclusive workplaces out in the open and start uncovering the solutions to embracing a culture that cares for everyone. I'm going to be having conversations with some of the most inspiring people in different countries and across industries who are pushing the boundaries on inclusion and diversity in the workplace, from topics such as parenting in the workplace, ethnicity, age, gender, mental health, and all things inclusion. I want to create a movement to change society through sharing life experiences and creating more empathy and connection. Why care? I believe that once we have organisations and societies that accept and value everyone for who they are, we become healthier, happier, and better in our roles both inside and outside work.
Hello. Nadia here, with a short welcome to this very different Why Care episode. I've been so deeply humbled by all of you who've been contacting me and engaging so much with the content of my new book, Beyond Discomfort. Thank you so much. It honestly means the world to me to know how much it's resonating with you and encouraging a practice of deeper self-reflection. This episode is the conversation I had with my dear friend Darin at the Beyond Discomfort book launch held at the Royal Society of Chemistry in London on the 21st of March 2024. It's a very unusual feeling because this time I'm the one being interviewed. Darin asks me about how I came to write the book, my personal story, the Beyond Discomfort model that forms the basis of the book, and what key messages I hope to land. A special thank you to Darin for his thoughtful questions, light-hearted yet powerful and beautifully crafted approach to this conversation. Admittedly very odd to be sitting on the other side, but incredibly grateful to all who attended and to all of you for your support and encouraging me to continue sharing my thoughts with the world. If you have read the book, I'd be so grateful if you could leave an Amazon review. This makes more difference than you know. Please do share on socials and direct message me with your thoughts. I genuinely love hearing them. Now, on with the episode. Enjoy.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us, for being here, for celebrating this auspicious occasion.
Are we getting married?
You're not my type.
He's going to add words.
Sorry, Matt. There's something we've been meaning to tell you. No, it is an auspicious occasion. It's been in the making for how long? Months?
Yeah.
I mean, the
event or the actual writing?
Well, I mean the event, but the book itself has been a labour of love
for about a year and a half.
And that wasn't even actually when it started, right? And we'll get into that tonight, like where this book started. But firstly, just to recognise the faces in this room. So Nadia was really keen to just show some gratitude for all of you as our starting point, and just to recognise the distances people have travelled and the effort it's taken to be here, to take time out of your busy lives to come and celebrate with her. I mean, we have people in the room who have travelled from Italy, Germany, Spain, the Netherlands, USA, Scotland, Newcastle, Liverpool, Oxford, Peak District, Croydon. You are all extremely welcome. We're very grateful to have you here. Thank you. A few housekeeping notices just to make you aware of. We are also recording, so you are live witnesses to one of Nadia's Why Care podcast episodes.
Indeed.
So you are here as live witnesses to one of the next episodes. So keep an eye out for that as well. we're planning on spending about half an hour having a bit of a fireside chat, talking about the book, where it came from, the inspiration, but also what the book speaks to within organizations and leadership today. And then we'll create a little bit of space towards the end as well, just to open to the floor for any questions you may have. So I'll start with a brief introduction to myself and also just to Nadia, because I think we all know Nadia in different guises, whether that's a wife, a mother, a daughter, daughter-in-law, a close friend, an associate, a work colleague. I think we can all agree on one thing, though. She's certainly an inspiration. So my name is Darin de Klerk. I am equally as inspired by this person sitting on the stage next to me. We have worked together, we have cried together, grown together, parented, shared parenting stories together, and I have the great privilege of being, of holding Nadia in my closest group of friends, as you have seen me through one of the most difficult challenges of my own life, in my adult life. So thank you for having me in your life and having me here with you this evening to celebrate.
Thank you.
But let's talk about you, because that's what we're here to do, you and your book. So we met, and we always argue about this, because I always get it wrong, but it was 2015.
Okay.
We were on, I always say Fire B training, but I think it was Hogan psychometric training. No, it's the other way around. Nadia had, at that stage, 2 new babies in her life. One was her daughter, Ilana, who's here tonight, and the other was her consulting business, Avenir. And if that wasn't enough, she was also completing an MBA from Henley Business School at the time that we met. I think this attests to your dynamism and your kind of go-getting and your strength of drive and achievement. Certainly one of the things that inspires me, and I'm sure a lot of people in this room tonight. As well as all of that, you are a chartered occupational psychologist. You are a certified coach.
Yes.
And have been operating in the space for the last 20 years, working with leadership development, culture change, organizational strategy. You're a keynote speaker on topics of inclusion, bias, prejudice. You are the creator and host of your own podcast series, Why Care? And now a celebrated author, but also HR's most influential thinker from 2023, and the HR Champion of the Year from the European Diversity Awards.
Yes.
And I mean, I just wanted to take a breath and let that settle.
Yes, thank you.
And humble as well. But as I said, tonight is a celebration. Tonight is about launching this new...
Third baby.
Oh, do you know, I was going to say third baby, and then I thought, if you were a man, would I have made reference to babies here tonight?
Ooh,
I did have to check
like
myself.
that.
So this new project, initiative, undertaking, product...
Baby.
Thank you.
All of the above.
All of the above. So I'm interested, Nadia, in where it all started.
Yeah.
And I mean, specifically the kind of spark for this book.
Yeah. So facilitating conversations with leaders globally, it became clear that actually I could tell them, I could list the skills to be an inclusive leader, but actually it wasn't washing with a lot of them, right? Why should they? And it didn't make sense to them. And there were different challenges that I was experiencing. You know, some people just thought, well, look, I treat everyone the same. I'm as fair as they can be already. Some people just didn't kind of get how to create equity, like how far do we go? When do we stop creating equity when we know it's, and others were just like, well, look, I'm really I'm really worried now that because I'm a white male, that I'm going to be discriminated against, and that's how I feel. And actually, I feel excluded from the conversation. And so there was this wave and I was thinking, actually, no amount of skill development is going to, it's not going to help create inclusion if we're experiencing these emotional barriers, right? There's a belief system that underpins what they're telling me. And if I don't listen to them and I just keep, beating down the same path in terms of, well, this is what you need to do in order to be inclusive, it's not going to get us anywhere. And actually, there's issues around diversity, equity, inclusion, because I think there are times where we do try and go down just the one path and say, well, this is what you need to do, this is how you need to be inclusive. And people are just sitting there, and either they're passively sitting there wondering, I don't buy into this, and then they'll just do something else or do nothing at all. Or they'll actively push back against it. And I think we've seen a lot of active pushing back, and unfortunately, in various parts of the world, including the States and here, because people don't get it, and we haven't taken them on a journey to understand.
And I think we, in the work that we do, we have this privilege of seeing inside these organizations, right? And having this kind of an opportunity to see leadership at its best, at its worst, but kind of in the round. And I think that gives us insight. But like you say, often it can just feel like a bolt-on, right? Like it's another thing I have to do on the list of things it takes to be a good leader.
Exactly, on top of everything. And let's face it, in today's world, we're under so much pressure. It's so fast-paced. We're always 24/7 and then some. And to then get them to switch modes and think, oh, well, how do I do this inclusively? It's just one ask too many for so many leaders, especially if they don't. If it's just being pushed down, it's like driven from the top, which is obviously important for organisational change, but equally, unless the leaders actually get it and are bought in, they're just not going to do very much. And that's not going to create culture change.
How is this different? How does this create space for leaders? How does it create a different dialogue and a different way for leaders to consider inclusion, equity?
So I'm a psychologist, in case any of you didn't know that. And so
I think it was in the list.
Was it in the list?
Yeah.
And so I took an approach which was, well, let me just get to really understand what's going on emotionally here. And I do see, whenever you see someone's behaviour, whether it's defensiveness or anger or frustration or whatever you see, usually there's an emotion that sits more deeply behind that, right, underneath it. And often it's fear. They're afraid of something. There's fear there. And then what we see on the outside is that anger and frustration and their destructive behaviours or them not getting on board, not buying into what we're trying to do here. And of course, there's DEI, diversity, equity and inclusion practitioners, HR specialists, whoever is trying to drive an initiative is hugely frustrating because then, why aren't they doing what we need them to do? And so the book then, so as I mentioned, so having spoken to different leaders, I realised that actually, there's a real, something that encourages people or discourages people to act and be active in their allyship when it comes to diversity, equity and inclusion. And there's something about how receptive they are about learning about themselves, which is key and fundamental to leadership in general. Right, learning about yourselves, really having that self-insight and understanding who you are, and really understanding and being open to learning about other people. And so that's what's different about the book is that, whilst it's based on a model and a framework, which any good MBA, my fellow MBAs will get that. We're taught that. It's like a good 2x2 framework. People can digest it.
Yes.
It's easy to understand. Yeah. Whilst it is a 2x2 model, I don't believe in putting people in boxes, and that's the whole premise of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're all unique, we're all different. But what I wanted was to allow people to read and just reflect. Maybe, do I hold that belief? Maybe I do a little bit. Maybe I have. You have thought about that at times when this initiative is, and I've questioned, and that's okay. It doesn't make us bad people that we're questioning things. It makes us, we're critically kind of looking at this and going, is this fair? It doesn't feel very fair. And sometimes diversity, equity, inclusion doesn't to some people.
Yeah.
So I wanted to provoke thought so that people would read it and go, yeah, I thought that. And actually, what might be going on for me when I think that? What could be what could be some of the emotional triggers that I feel? And so I'm trying to, I suppose, insert a little bit of self-reflection and self-awareness in leaders, because I think that that's the key. I think that's the self-awareness piece, and really wanting to understand yourself, your emotions, what sits underneath, why you feel and believe what you believe, and being willing, just curious to potentially see something slightly differently. And then that's this book, basically.
It's raising all sorts of curiosities in me, right? And I'm interested in the kind of personal story behind it as well, like your story. And I think one of the things that struck me about reading the book was just that wonderful mix of it being, you know, an MBA, there's data and there's information and it helps build understanding, but at the same time it's you, and it's you sharing yourself with us. And I'm going to ask you to read a short section of the book to kind of share some of your voice with us in the room, because I think it really brings to life like that kind of balance. But I think before that, I'm interested in, I suppose, how your own personal history and experience has shaped some of your perspective, but also your choice to work in this field, this area, and whether there's something there that you wouldn't mind sharing with us this evening.
It's only between you and me anyway. So.
That's true. There's no one else here.
So it's a really good question. And I suppose it comes down, so my background, and for some of you might not know, so I'm first generation UK born. So my parents came to the UK and my brother and I were born here. They came from Mauritius. And so, you know, we sort of grew up in a fairly low socioeconomic area, I suppose. And, there were a lot of council estates and the socioeconomic background, were children from who were predominantly white children when I was growing up in my primary school, and who just didn't really, either was told, not so nice things about people of colour, but certainly I was treated I was bullied as a child, and, not severely. I had a little group of ethnic minority friends who we just seemed to kind of congregate with each other. But I certainly have experience knowing what it feels like to be, very clearly not belong.
Yeah.
I was called Packy and that sort of thing, which is, if I could turn back the time, I would just say, I'm Mauritian, actually. Mauritian. So my mum really drilled into me, study, study, study. And so she was the one who saw something in me to get me into a secondary school, but it was an all-girls grammar school. And, again, I stuck out like a sore thumb, quite honestly. It was a sea of white and a few sort of brown dotted around. But I had the privilege of being educated by those same teachers as it was a lot of the not all of them, but a lot of the girls came from very, good families, middle-class families. And so for me, I always felt like I was desperately trying to fit in, to a point where it wasn't until my early 30s did I actually look at myself and go, gosh, yeah, I'm brown. Because I worked so hard to fit in that I actually convinced myself that I was so like everyone else that I was white, and the skin colour didn't matter. That's my story of just not knowing what it feels like. And I don't want anyone to feel like they don't belong, because life's too short. Why can't we just all enjoy each other and feel like that togetherness and connectedness? And so that's driven me in diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I see the power that it can create when you have people connecting, and the incredible things that can come from people connecting. with each other, collaborating, really seeing each other, wanting to understand each other, and hearing each other's voices and hearing each other's uniqueness and accepting that uniqueness and embracing it and going, I don't agree with you, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay. You know, we're still good.
Yeah.
So how can
we can coexist with this difference. Yeah.
You know, and I see the world and it's just so full of hate and separation and, you know, and I was like, I don't get it. And I don't see why it should be. So that's my story.
Thank you. And I felt it, right? And anyone who's had any experience of being a minority, of experiencing prejudice, I think that same sense of like feeling different, I recognize that as well in my own life. And just, I don't know, sometimes how hard you have to work. I recognize the drive that comes from that as well, like to, I suppose, prove yourself in a world that feels so different or so kind of inundated with difference.
Yeah, it's just, I so wanted to fit in that I just assimilated into, you know, and actually, and so I then wanted to claim back kind of who I was at a point and just kind of go, no, I'm Mauritian, and actually that makes me unique and part of who I am. Yeah. So let me be Mauritian and be British and
powerful.
You know? Yeah. So there's so much of me in this book, so much story about me and my perspective, and I hope that it resonates with people in terms of, you know, your own stories. And
that is so key, isn't it? And I think you've said this in your podcast many times. But actually, I realized this when I was with a client the other day as well, like how change starts from stories, right? Like telling stories, feeling people's experiences, you know, living those experiences with them to an extent by understanding them, or at least being curious. I think curious is the word that sticks. And then I suppose extrapolating that to the impact that leaders can have through showing some of that curiosity, understanding, willingness to be aware and to, I suppose, act on some of that awareness feels really important, given how important the role of leaders is today. And I don't know if you have a perspective on that in terms of, you know, you said already, like things are going awry, left, right, and centre across the world: politics, economics, war. Like the role of organisational leaders has become so much more important within society, I think. Yeah,
and I think that there's something around what some of the leaders, certainly some of the older leaders in organisations have been taught. Not something, it's just what they've been taught about what leadership is. And there's a lot of leadership experts in this room. And we know that actually that archetypal leader of one of, you know, has to be strong, has to know the answer, has to be able to take their team from A to B, has to be able to kind of hold to account and you know, create energy and a drive for their goal. You know, that doesn't have to happen in the way that, you know, some of the old leadership theories say. And really what you can get from your team, from your colleagues as a leader, if you really see them, if you take the time to really understand who they are, what they're bringing, you know, where their strengths are, where their pain points are, what their perspective is, how it could be different to yours, treating them in a way that isn't actually like for like, but actually what's necessary in order to get to the best from them. And that's leading with the heart. Which is very different to leading with the head, which is a very, you know, that archetypal leader, you know, this is what we need to do, let's go this way, to actually recognising and just dialing up the radar of what people need. Yeah. Not easy, I think. It's not easy. For a lot of leaders. It's not easy. Kind of leading with the heart, not the head. Yeah. Oh, it's so alien. Yeah. And actually, it's so intangible as well. It's like, you know, so you're saying I need to, you know, especially data-led leaders. You know, it's soft really... Soft skills? Yeah, exactly. You know, and they put it down, you know, I'll do that fluffy stuff or whatever. Actually, you can reframe that to understanding the power of what you can get from in your organisation if it's led by the heart, is important.
I'm going to ask you to read a short
Okay.
bit from your book. I've chosen something that I think is interesting, and I think it highlights some of your voice as an author, that the expertise, but also the kind of personal humility and sharing and authenticity. So,
All right.
thank you.
When I married my husband, I joined...
That was a nervous giggle. Matt hasn't read the book. He didn't know he was mentioned.
When I married my husband, I joined a white, middle-class and incredibly welcoming family. For any of you who have a cross-cultural partnership, you'll recognise that it comes with certain challenges. These challenges are no one's fault. They simply exist. My husband's family engage in different type of conversation to my family, find things funny that are baffling to me, and place emphasis on different values to the ones my family give importance to. I recognise that some blending and compromising of family traditions is almost always necessary when two families come together in order to make the new family unit work. However, I also believe that this is heightened when cultural differences come into play. When sitting at the dinner table, going for a family walk or going on holiday, I'm constantly aware of being the only racial minority in the group. I stand out when I am with my husband's side of our family, and it is obvious that I don't innately belong. Now, you would be absolutely right in challenging that the same could be said for my husband when he's with my side of the family. However, to see the difference in our two situations, you must be willing to explore history in depth. What is the value that has been placed on whiteness compared to any shade of brown? Even in countries where the majority of people have brown skin, there is generally a preference for being fairer. Women, in particular, who are of a darker skin tone often get bullied, are given nicknames, and find it hard to marry due to being seen as less attractive. This dates back to a sign of wealth, as those labouring in the fields all day would have had darker skin due to sun exposure. It also points to a deeply held belief that white is best. Notice what feeling this evokes in you when you read those words. White is best. If it is something you haven't noticed before, are you open to exploring it? Colorism, the preference for lighter shades of brown skin, and racism are so deeply embedded in symbols and the language around us that we typically don't notice them. For example, white symbolises peace and purity, whilst black symbolises death and evil. In 2016, Nadia Powell, founder of Utopia, together with casting director Selma Nichols, launched the Christmas So White campaign to counter the whitewashing of images in the media, focusing on the absence of images of minority ethnic families enjoying Christmas. The underlying message is that a perfect Christmas is a white Christmas. Whilst in recent years we have seen the emergence of black characters in comic books, there is still a dominance of white superheroes, and when a superhero gets taken over by evil, there is tendency for their suit to be darker. Think Spider-Man and Venom. When Harry Potter and the Cursed Child first came to London's West End, there was an absolute uproar because black actress Noma Dumezweni was cast as Hermione Granger. This went against what many people believed about Hermione's character. Not just that she should have white skin, but potentially also what this represents about the character's virtuousness. These messages are all around us, and they are picked up and absorbed from a very young age. In one of my workshops, a participant shared, "My nephew asked for his 4th birthday wish if he could be white." We don't have to look back to times of slavery to see the evidence of white is best. It's right here in our current day life. So you see, when I'm with my husband's side of the family, I am carrying all of that invisible trauma, past and present, with me. My husband, on the other hand, has an unconscious assuredness of status that has forever been present and is equally invisible to him. This is nothing for him or his family to feel guilty about, as they can't control what happened in the past or the pervasive symbol and images in the world around us that reinforce racism. However, there are several things that need to happen in order to make a difference. Firstly, acceptance that, on the whole, the world carries a white is best mentality, and this influences all that people are, see, and believe. And secondly, taking this power with the responsibility it invokes by bringing a sensitive curiosity to what the invisible trauma is and the consequences of it. That is, how does the historical lower status of having brown skin affect my experience of being in the family?
White is best. I mean, the words, they're penetrating, right? I mean, I think the thing that strikes me, and I think the challenge you offer, that kind of sensitive curiosity, that willingness to explore, that rides through the book, that awareness you mentioned for leaders, for readers, to be thinking about yourself, to be kind of turning it on yourself, turning the lens in on yourself.
And I want to, obviously there are a lot of personal stories in there, but each time I tried to kind of go, well, what does this evoke in you? What are you thinking of now? Because inevitably people then reflect, hopefully what I'm inviting them to do, reflect on their own story, and their own narrative and what they carry with them. And so hopefully, that it sort of gives that sense of non-judgmental. And that was I never wanted to feel like, can't believe you think that way, or it's never meant to be. It's just sort of just enter with curiosity, and it's okay if you find out that maybe you've missed something, or that you haven't necessarily explored why you believe a certain thing, or what your experience is just because you're white, or just because you're a man, or it's okay. Like, we're all different, and the world perceives us and treats us in a way based on those diversity characteristics that we hold. And we can't do anything about those diversity characteristics because we are who we are. We were born into the family we were born into, with the colour of skin with the sexuality we have. Like, we can't do anything about it, and no one should ever make you feel guilty for who you are. But we do have a responsibility to own who we are and how we perceive the world, the lens we see the world because of who we are, and how the world views us because of how we are. And if we can hold that, because it's hugely uncomfortable at times to recognise that the world might treat me differently compared to someone else, and be able to, and that's what leadership is. I'm okay to say, yeah, maybe I got to the top here, not purely based on how amazing I am, but there might be some small part that could be down to
my privilege.
My unearned advantage because I'm white, because look, nothing to feel guilty about. But hold it and take responsibility for it. And then when you recognise it, find out if you walked through a door that was open, maybe someone's back there struggling to find a key.
Love that.
Right?
Love that.
Then that's your responsibility. If you don't notice it, then you can't do anything about it. But once you do, then that's on you.
This brings us to your model, right? And we won't have time to go into the model, but both of those elements, that awareness of self, that curiosity, and being receptive to where others are at, and then the action piece. So I'm through the door, that person doesn't have a key. What's my role? That's part of the model, right? These are the two axes. So I'll just put it up here. I mean, it's on your sketch cards as well. But
yes, actually.
Talk us through those two elements. We've spoken a lot about the curiosity piece. Maybe talk a little bit to the willingness to act piece, and where you see that kind of coming in for leaders. What does that look like?
Yeah. So the willingness to act, say on the horizontal axis, is all about really taking your responsibility to then do something as an ally, walking alongside someone who might need a door opening for them that wasn't before, and actually recognising and this is the tough part, because it really sometimes feels like if you help that person, if you open that door, where does that leave you? Right? And this is sort of the disconcerted. Now, this person, as a leader, if they're feeling disconcerted, is really worried about that, I don't understand now where I fit in here. Because now, and I've heard, and it's not okay, actually, that men, white men, cis hetero men, feel like if they walk into a room and they try to contribute to a diversity, equity, inclusion conversation, that they're looked at in a, how do you...
What are you doing here?
You think you're okay to voice your opinion, you have an opinion here. Actually, it's important that they do have an opinion here. And so I can see how this disconcerted feeling can arise. And it's sort of like, well, if this is how I'm being treated now, if we get to a point where actually we're really progressing on diversity, equity, inclusion, where am I? I don't factor in at all, right? And this is, again, that discomfort of they've enjoyed certain advantages that they, may not have been aware of, would have been invisible, intangible to them, that it feels really unfair now to, almost that pendulum has swung too far in the opposite direction, and now I'm going to be disadvantaged. And no one's willing to act if it's going to be at their disadvantage. Of
course. But it's referred to as a zero-sum mindset,
yes.
right? Like it's competitive. It's like, if you're winning, I'm losing. As opposed to actually there's enough for everyone, there's abundance, that everyone can win.
Yes, and it's hard because we're asking them to believe in something that isn't clear.
Yes.
How do I know that if I do act and I do show allyship and we do bring everyone with us, that I'm not going to lose out, right? How do I know that this power that I have, I'm not going to be able to hang on, how do I know what it looks like? Because actually people enjoy power, and wherever there is privilege and unadvantage, there is power. There's always power, and people really like hanging on to their power.
Yeah.
So it's deeply uncomfortable to feel like actually diversity and inclusion work could mean that I have to let go of some of it.
I mean, I had a tiny, simple example of this traveling into London the other day. Just by the pure nature of where I got on the train, I got a seat. And by the time we were kind of approaching London, everyone was standing. And I was sitting, recognizing my privilege of having a seat. And what power that brought. And there I had choice, right? I was able to kind of stand up and offer. But yes, it just kind of struck me, my God, even that, it wasn't about my power. It was when I got on, it was just by chance. But there's power in that.
Every system, there is power.
Yeah.
In every system, your family system, right? There's power. Because, let's just think about it. If any of you have siblings, right? You know your order. Were you first? Were you second? Did you come last? Right? There's power there. Every system has power.
Yeah.
It's just that it's so intangible, but it plays out. You think about your sibling and your family dynamics. It's power.
Yeah. We need a whole another hour for that conversation.
Right?
Yes. A middle child. So
middle child.
Let's move on, shall we? Say no more. So I know the idea here is not to place yourself in a box, right? You've spoken about that. It's not about going, I'm a cheerleader, I'm disconcerted.
No.
But I'm interested because obviously there's characteristics here, right? And you've spoken a little bit about what that might look like. I suppose just to bring it kind of back to home, I'm interested in the concept of Beyond Discomfort, which is the title of the book. And I'm interested in an example you might have to share of when you've pushed yourself into that mindset, belief system, way of operating. If you have an example, or if you have an example of someone else who's kind of operating in that space, just to kind of bring that to life.
I mean, I see it. I do, because working in this space, it means I see it often.
Yeah.
Glimmers of it.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, it's not that you're constantly going to be leading beyond discomfort. That is, it's just, we're human, and that's just not reality. You can't hold yourself in such a high sort of pedestal that you think, oh, I'm constantly, you can strive to constantly be curious about yourself and learn and lead beyond, and really just, you know, understand, have the courage to delve deeply about how did that trigger me, and what does that mean in terms of my beliefs, and where is that coming from? That's what a beyond discomfort lead, and I see it. You know, I mean, there's people in the room who I've spoken to even who have said, gosh, you know, I didn't see colour. And now I realise that, my goodness, what a mistake that was, right? That not to see colour. I mean, this is sort of a cheerleading kind of way of being now, but which is, if I want to be an inclusive leader, I have to treat everyone the same, because that's what fairness is. And that certainty is so wonderful to hang on to. And in fact, HR, you know, human resources for years have been telling us, treat everyone the same and then you won't be taken to tribunal.
Equality.
Right, equality, right? And so this concept of equity is like, some people need more, some people need, I'm sorry, I don't get that. Like, but, you know, so this leader beyond discomfort, and I've, you know, again, you know, people in the room who have shared stories with me, it's just like, gosh, how wrong was I? That vulnerability, being able to say, okay, and then if someone challenges them, rather than shutting it down, actually willing to explore it, finding out, reading, speaking to people, listening to TED Talks, like just exploring and taking it upon themselves the courage to delve deeply and realise, okay, I might not have had this quite the way I would. And that's sometimes, this is deeply held beliefs, things that we were taught by our parents, and that we were like strong, deeply held values and beliefs that then are challenged. And that can feel tough. So actually, leading beyond discomfort is that psychological work, of the work that you do on yourself, to recognise when you've got it wrong, and to constantly be striving to learn more about other people and their lived experiences, so that you can continue to do better and, you know, include and involve and make sure that people feel like they've been seen.
What a lovely way to draw us towards a close. I think I'm noticing that people have been attentively sitting and listening for the last 40 minutes. And so I want to just kind of bring us to a close. I'm interested in what comes next, beyond discomfort. Where do we go from here?
Well, some of you in the room are keen for me to do a doctorate or a DBA or a PhD. Some of you want me on the Great British Bake Off.
I think clap if you vote for.
Quite honestly, I think my husband is just hoping that none of the above happen, and that I can actually spend some, like, not be up at sort of 5 o'clock in the morning on, you know, doing work and things. But, like, you know, I'm
sure he wouldn't have it any other way.
Do I have another book in me? That's been a common question. Look, I'll never say never, will I? But for now, I'm going to... So I think beyond discomfort, really, there is something here. And I'm obviously going to... I mean, I would love to know, as you read it, if you wouldn't mind sharing with me your thoughts, because for me, that's so precious. And, you know, I respect all of you in this room. I think you are all amazing for everything that you do in your own fields and what, you know. And so to have you read and, you know, offer comments, feedback, like genuinely, and I don't just want a load of compliments. That's, you know, because actually I think there's a program potentially here, you know, beyond discomfort. But how do we, what's the work, the deep work then? How do we actually get leaders to work on themselves in the way that I'm talking, right? So I think that there's something there. I wouldn't mind going and spreading the word beyond the UK. So, you know, I haven't told my husband this yet, but I might see if there's opportunities in different, you know.
Lovely.
Let's see.
Yes.
I'm just going to have fun. I'm going to have fun with it and just kind of, explore what comes from this. And then I think just trust that path and see where it takes me. I'm not ruling out the doctorate or the PhD, but...
Or Bake Off.
Or Bake Off. Someone said The Apprentice as well. I'm like, okay.
Goodness.
Yeah.
Will's your oyster. So before we close, if anyone has any questions, we have about 10 minutes. And there is a roving mic. Thank you, Nim.
Firstly, Nadia, thanks for being a massive inspiration.
Stand up, Ken.
And yeah, Nadia mentors me, so one of the main reasons why I've even gone into the D&I space in the first place. So thank you for that, and massively proud of you for accomplishing this. But on to my actual question. Reading the book, so you've in this room, we've got D&I leaders, you've got just business leaders, etc. What's the main takeaways you want people to gain from reading it?
Yeah, thanks, Ken. So, if by reading the book, it just gets you to reflect that little bit about your own belief system, something that you just took for granted, that you never realised about yourself. At the end of each chapter, there's sort of a series of open, kind of reflective questions, just to provoke some thought. And I'd love for, maybe those questions for you to obviously think about it yourself, but also take it to your teams. And actually, I've been working on the website, for the Beyond Discomfort website. There's a questionnaire that you can take, your teams can take, and just it's not meant to assess you. It is not a psychological assessment. I know I'm a psychologist. I am not psychometrically evaluating you. It is simply to provoke thought. Use it as a tool and expand some conversation, new conversations. I'd love it if there were some new conversations that just felt different, because I think we need different and new conversations and if you can create a safe space for your teams to share, imagine what you could learn if you opened up that sort of conversation with them. And so, yeah, I'd love to hear if you do. Yeah, thank you.
Nadia, first of all, congratulations. I think, it's an amazing achievement to have written the book, and I know how much time you spent doing it. So, my question really is around people's feelings of discomfort in terms of we all hop from all of these spaces. But sometimes leaders have a habit of getting stuck. What's your advice to that?
Yeah, leaders get stuck often because there's a fear. They're stuck because there's a fear of saying the wrong thing, a fear of misstepping, a fear of what's going to happen if I get it wrong. And quite honestly, the culture around sort of just cancelling people whenever it just doesn't help. It just further breeds that fear that they might get it wrong. I think when leaders are stuck, they need to be coached through that stuckness, quite honestly, because they need to be willing to be curious about themselves. Where does that stuckness come from? What are they holding that about diversity, equity, inclusion work that jars with them? And it might jar, it might evoke emotion. And what is it that they're afraid to do? What's going on here? And so one-to-one coaching or, some coaching circles, anything that can just open up a safe space for them just to explore.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I think would a lot of leaders know they were stuck is where my head went.
If they read the book, they might.
It's all about curiosity and self-awareness, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Key messaging.
Yeah. But you're right. I mean, a lot of leaders, and that's why we have some of the leaders we do in the world. But we're not going to go there because that's politics.
And we don't have time for that. We have a question here in the front.
Thank you. I'm Claire, and I'm one of our business leaders, Sarah's in the room. And a lot of my business leaders are proof-seeking. We love the evidence, we love the data. Help me when I go and talk to my executive colleagues, help me with something I could say to them that would get them to connect with the book so that I can encourage them into this kind of mindset.
Yeah. Absolutely. Whenever you got sort of scientists or, a lot of people, they just want evidence and proof, and they get so wrapped up in like, well, how do I know? How much more do I, say they've got someone who's neurodivergent on their team, and that person in their team is saying, well, this is what I need. I'm not going to be able to, and so then they adjust their leadership or what that person needs to do. But then the other person who's got exactly the same job specification is saying, well, hang on a second, how come they're doing so much less, right? So where's the equity? How do we provide for one who might need it, but also create fairness in the team. And I'd love it for there to be an absolute hard kind of, this is what needs to happen, right? But, life isn't like that, and diversity, equity, inclusion certainly isn't like that. It's so much more complex. But what's important is that you shouldn't be afraid to delve into something, even though you might not see tangible evidence for it. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist, right? It doesn't mean that it's not there, right? You and I, Claire, could be walking down the street and you'll be like, oh, look at the beautiful green trees. And I'm like, Claire, they're purple, right? And you're like, Nadia, no, they're definitely green. And I'm like, no, I see purple trees. How do you know that I don't see purple trees? How can you be so sure those trees are green, right? And that's what we're working with here. How can we let go of we love certainty, and as leaders even more so. How can we let go of that certainty and just put it to one side for a moment and be curious and just wonder how this person's telling me something that I don't get. It doesn't add up to me. It's not 1 + 1 is 2. It's like some random number here coming out. I'm feeling uncomfortable about this, but I'm going to go with it. Let me explore a little bit further.
You said it earlier as well, right? It's moving from head to heart as well. Like holding yourself in that space. We often talk about like holding space for curiosity and...
Yeah, all right.
Final question.
Hello.
Hello.
Can't hear you. I'm interested if, in writing this book, you had any moments of being disconcerted yourself and how you worked your way through that.
Oh, thanks, Hayley.
maybe we should stop there. I think time-wise, we're probably...
So, I'm not sure about I've definitely felt a lack of courage to say something. Definitely. There was a time, my daughter, who's just here, she went off for a play date. She was about 5 years old. And I went to collect her it was a white family's house. And on the way home, I was like, oh, what did you play? And she was like, we played this game called Black Man, Mummy. And I was like, oh, can you expand a little bit? What's that game? Well, there were these trees, and we just took it in turns to just creep as close as we could to the tree. And then as soon as everyone else shouted Black Man, we just ran away screaming as fast as we could. And I was like, oh, like, what do you do with that? And so that's that moment of huge amount of discomfort. What do I do with this? Right? So I had an age-appropriate conversation with my daughter, trying to encourage her to empathise with how that might make me feel if people, as a person of colour was, running away screaming from me and what that meant and all of that. And then even though I knew that what should happen is that I should have a conversation with the family, I never did. We were fairly new at that time to the school, and that fear that what happens if, they take it badly? What happens? What about my daughter? And what if she suddenly finds out she can't play with that particular child anymore? And what if? And I never said anything. And, that's that fear. How do you show allyship? How do you stand up, even though it might be risky? So, yeah.
And I think also, how do you forgive yourself and keep moving forwards, right? Like you said, there are moments when we will be in this beyond discomfort space, and there are moments when we'll be down here and not acting in our kind of most courageous selves. And I think it's holding that lightly for ourselves as well.
Yeah.
If you have any more questions, if you want to pick up with Nadia, she'll be at the back signing books. One final plug, I think, was just for...
So we're doing some research to build a workbook that sits alongside Beyond Discomfort. And so if you were interested in being interviewed to participate, to share your stories about when you've led Beyond Discomfort, please let us know. And also, obviously, pass it on. And if you've got people you know who might want to participate. And as Darin said, there is an after party. Of course there is. Of course there is. So that's just going to be permanently up now, because then you'll know where you're going. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us.
That concludes this Why Care Beyond Discomfort the Launch episode. I'm still riding the high from that evening and all that has followed since. If you'd like to discuss Beyond Discomfort in your organisation, please get in touch to find out more. I'm always open to conversations about delivering keynotes, facilitated leadership discussions, workshops, and full inclusive leadership programmes. It's been a pleasure to share my special evening with you. Thanks for tuning in.